it is my pleasure to welcome you at the next conference in Łódź. And let me introduce our first keynote speakers, Krzysztof Wodiczko and his interlocutor Ryszard Kluszczyński, and I'm giving the space to our guests.
Good evening. I have a great honor and a personal pleasure to introduce Krzysztof Wodiczko, one of the most important artists working in public domain. Artist, the most famous because of his projections on monuments, on building all over the world. He presented almost 100 projections like this in Australia, US, Canada, Japan, and 10 European countries. But he also made several works with different instruments, vehicles, always trying to bring to possibility to talk people who were not visible in public space. Veterans of wars, immigrants, homeless, all the people who don't have the proper representation in media space, in cultural systems, in public relations. We are going to talk about only a few issues from this huge work, because this is many years of work of Krzysztof Wodiczko. So we are going to start with some older projects dealing with vehicles, instruments, to come in the next section to the most recent project. Krzysztof Wodiczko will be talking about this extremely important new project dealing with culture of war, I would call it like this. His most recent works try to organize public opinion against some cultural patterns which is not really good for us, but sometimes we can think that they are very important. They are not that important, and Krzysztof Wodiczko will tell us why. The floor is yours.
And then I hope we'll have a conversation afterwards. Yes. I count very much on this part of our presence here.
Yes, and it will be also the part for the questions
be inspired
from the viewers.
To maybe elaborate on especially the last project you mentioned. Mm-hmm. So I will start my presentation not with the oldest projects, but with the ones that play a very special role in the development of my work with people, meaning the projects that are media projects situated in public space and also at the same time giving an opportunity for others to share with unsolicited acts of speech their experience in hope to be heard and recognized as present and as important actors in a democratic process. So let me start with the slide that will help me to explain the situation. What we see here is three people. This person on the left seems to be trying to avoid the gaze on those standing on the right side. he feels being deported, being evacuated, or being outside, in fact, of the field of vision. They are trying to deport him with their gaze because they're afraid of him. So the issue is, how can the person on the left be equipped emotionally and in other ways to begin a communication with those on the right who are afraid of him? And what can be done so the people on the right will come closer to him without fear? So this was a very important moment in my work, in the time of explosion of, first in my experience, xenophobia in Europe, during the time of first Le Pen. Now, unfortunately, we are witnessing third or fourth wave of xenophobia since then. Meantime, technology and media developed further. Maybe this beginning of the work of that time should assume new forms and new methods. But I will go back to that moment. What it is that we could design that will be in between the person on the left and the couple on the right. My thinking here, of course, had something to do with the very role of a stranger, of a newcomer in public space, which I consider potentially prophetic. The person who comes in from somewhere else brings a wealth of experience and also philosophical thought. He's putting in doubt his old country and also the new country to which he or she arrives. He disrupts the continuity of the discourse. He is both announcing and denouncing something. He's between the mother tongue and new language. He's between the lost land and promised land. He is the beginning of something. He's a hope for everybody. But he's silent, or she is silent, smiling all the time, as immigrants always do, just in case. Always ready to cooperate, but not really knowing what to say, what's wrong. They are ethicists, politicians. They are psychoanalysts. They have all of those skills, and they sometimes speak many, many languages. Not just one or two, maybe 8, maybe 9, as I noticed, working with them. So, those were the series of projects I developed at that time. The kind of series mutation of various walking sticks that were equipped with a very primitive technology, like a video monitor and speaker, and also taking advantage of an ancient technology of displacement, the walking stick as a companion of the person who is displaced, which actually contains the history of the owner's displacement, like a shepherd's staffs. So the first version was very abstract, maybe to have a secret code of number of, I don't know, the number of times the person was deported or detained, or let's say the number of borders the person crossed and so forth. Then from the right to the left, the project developed into different version in which the road of this staff was in fact equipped with containers for various precious relics of the person. So the story was inscribed, recorded at the top of the stick while at the center there were various objects, documents, precious things that testify to the history of displacement. So, great tool, narrative tool. People ask questions, what's there? Or will listen to not the person, but the stick, the companion who's already speaking. So, of course, the immigrant would say, don't listen to this. This is actually not true. It was something else that happened. Media is always an obstacle, but also a great opportunity. So thank you for your help. Yes, even those equipments required some assistance, technical assistance. There's always something that needs to be done to help them to work. Now, of course, the person on the right, again there's a person on the right, the people on the left, will say, the two of you, where are you from? Genuine question, nice question to ask, generous question. But it's the wrong question. How do you know that we are from the same place? Huh? Oh, actually I speak 6 languages, he speaks 8, we share 2. We are from 2 completely different places on the planet. Also, why are you asking this question? Was it so important? Are we going to operate in your world as a work of geography? Why don't you ask us other questions? What are we doing here? What's our work like? You know, what's our situation? Existential, economical. Why don't you ask this question? So, of course, questioning of a question is already political and ethical act. The dialogue starts. None of this will happen without equipment, without artifice. Transitional artifice, or maybe even transitional object, speaking like Derek Winnicott. Something that absorbs the outside world and also inner world of those people belongs to none of those worlds entirely. It's something in between. The inner world of the owner of the stick and the outside world to which that person is moving in more and more, while the outside world needs to, of course, learn the inner world. So in a case, the issue here is a speech act, visibility, and fact equality. Hannah Arendt said that visibility and equality are connected. Therefore, inequality and invisibility go hand in hand. But visibility and invisibility has something to do also with presence and possibility to exercise, to assert the right of free speech. Paresia. Now, the paresia, here I'm coming back to my favorite writer, Michel Foucault, who brought that issue to us in his Berkeley speeches, lectures. The paresia has a specific relation to truth, through frankness, certain relationship to his or her own life, through danger, a certain type of relation to himself or other people through criticism. So this is in specific relation to the moral law through freedom and duty. More precisely, paresia is a verbal activity in which a speaker expresses his personal relation to truth and risks his life because he recognizes truth-telling as a duty to improve or help other people as well as himself. Himself, because at the time of ancient Greece, only men really had the right to paresia. Now, very small group of people, polities, had those rights. Slaves, women, foreigners, to various degrees, did not have those rights. Now, on paper, according to the Constitution, the Grand Declarations of Human Rights and rights of the citizen, all should potentially have a right to this right, as Hannah Arendt said. Therefore, struggle to assert those rights becomes a major task of anybody who enters the public space, recognizes one another, brings a new meaning to it, and must spread the issues of rights, which is the definition of public space from some philosophical suggestion by Claude Lefort in the 70s. I think that space doesn't really exist. It's a utopia. Space is barricaded by some who speaks at the expense of others. So in order to give a possibility of those who have less chance to speak, less capacity to speak, less confidence to speak, less access to media, we should develop very special, exceptional situation equipment. So that's why art and design in public space, indeed in public domain, is definitely obliged to consider a possibility of creating those conditions in a technological, performative way, pedagogical way, and many other ways. So you see here those various details, relics. I don't have time to explain all of those things, but sometimes the question what's there is not being answered at all. The person says it's not for you to know, it's for me to have, because I need it for various reasons. So it's not always to be elaborated. Still, lots of equipmental kind of qualities of those relics are there. Okay. Now we need some sound. Without sound, those projects don't work. So I will. No? Okay. Still very weak sound. So you can, but at least you could see that the person is speaking.
Можно это купить или продается или как?
Да я не знаю, решает. Здесь добровольно, да?
Надо продавать?
Да. Что так, они хотят здесь, что снимаю, что здесь,
So we can see here how those relics are provoking, inspiring dialogue. So the question, of course, is what's in this one? He says, he says time in Swedish. I guess it's about time. Time is the most precious thing in human life. It's the most precious human value, use value, in fact. Well, the time is being stolen from those people. So the issue is then how to change the situation. They are the ones who actually are healing society from numbness towards themselves, but also healing themselves from their own incapacitation and lack of confidence in conveying their situation to others. So they are both doctors and patients, you could say. Or there's a possibility of equipment that is a combination of a gag and megaphone. The both invokes and the incapacitation, but also it gives a special powers to the person to speak in a new enhanced voice. So those instruments helped me to develop methods of working with people in public space, psychologically speaking, politically speaking, and aesthetically speaking, to the point that I can go back to my earlier projects and with the new kind of technological and media plan. That is to continue my projections on buildings, which I was doing for years before, using slides mostly, no video. Video was not accessible, not available. It became available suddenly. So the sound, motion, therefore, using the experience of those instruments, I could now re-enter projection on monuments, actually using the monuments, buildings, as the way to, as vehicles through which those people will speak, being much larger than they are, taking advantage of the prestige, historical prestige of those symbolic urban structures, to take over them or to actually animate them with their voice and gesture. In this way, parasiting in a way on their powers, be able to be more present in the city. So one of those buildings is the monuments that I engaged was Kunstmuseum in Basel. It's a palace of culture. That's incredibly important. Monument institution to which most of the illegals, especially immigrants, don't have much access. So the idea was to allow those people to actually be present, not in this building, but on this building, to start conveying their experience and their point of view on society from the high up position. So the position that will require everybody else to look up at those people rather than down. This is a very serious change of perspective, that one can feel one's own neck, one's own body, looking up, as if the person was a teacher, a father, a mother, somebody who knows more, who can actually protect us, rather than like a speechless child, the person outside of our vision. So, here they are. And here we are, looking up. And here there is a museum, empty as it is, in some ways, and in other ways very thick, very rich. The culture.
Wenn die Leute mich fragen, also wo du kommst, das finde ich normal. Ich denke, die Leute wollen einfach mich kennenlernen.
Ja, ich habe Schweizer Pass. Die zeigen sagen, ich bin Schweizer. Und du bist nichts. Nur weil er ein Papier hat, wo drauf steht, du bist Schweizer. Das sagt nicht, dass er ein Schweizer ist. Er muss hier wirklich hier leben, auch sein Land lieben.
So just a brief a picture of that project. Of course, they were speaking a very interesting language. All of them were trying, they came from all over the world, from very countries very far away from each other, but they try to speak Swiss German. And that was kind of shocking situation, but of course that's what they do every day. What's the shocking was to see what those people do every day and how those people are every day. But they are invisible, are faceless figures. And I guess illegal immigrants in Switzerland historically have been in troubles. Perhaps more than in other countries. So there is a rich narrative here. It could be inscribed into the ground narrative of the city. But the city monuments, as I will elaborate later, and the city as such, is basically a monument, one big monument. It's a monumental symbolic space that is actually celebrating the history of the victors, of those who succeeded, at the expense of those vanquished, nameless people for whom there is no form to recognize their presence. There is no history. There are the people with no history. So the question is how to inscribe those people or turn them into people of history. They are, in fact, our history. They are history of the city of Basel. They are history of Switzerland. They actually are making history. They are the future of the city. Now, of course, another series of projects, there are more what used to be called, or then invented in my place where I used to teach at MIT, wearable equipment, the wearable technology. It was all invention by, in fact, one of my students, Steve Mann. That was actually developed at MIT when I was running this interrogative design group as a part of the Center for Advanced Visual Studies. It was a project that responded to the situation of junior high school students, some, not all of them, in Japan, who are actually called school refusers, not school dropouts as in the States. They go to school sometimes and refuse it, so it's a different situation. And also they refuse, they go to home, they stay lots of time at home and refuse home. They deal with conflicts at home. So they are between, they're a very special force in Japan, philosophical, transformative force, take very serious responsibility to actually confront the situation. So of course, Ministry of Education has special schools for them, and they receive treatment, drugs, and all sorts of special method of kind of containing their refusal. But so nobody wants to speak with them. And in fact, they said, well, it's true that in Japan there's an expression that one can say more of what person is thinking, looking at the person's back rather than face. So that was a suggestion from high school students. So we developed special equipment so they could speak through their back. It was also in collaboration with school psychologists and was an expert on school refusers from Kyoto University, Mr. Dr. Tatara, who was very instrumental in discussing some of those ideas, in mediating. So, well, this project was tested, for example, by someone who was going to school, refusing the school, but the school was refusing him. He was being bullied. So he armed himself with his equipment, went to the classroom. Now, it's kind of a strange thing to wear. sometimes the laughter can provide better conditions for the beginning of thinking than meaning vibration of the diaphragm, than what Benjamin said, vibration of the soul. It's important to notice that laughter is a good, that someone who is alienated and estranged, wearing a strange equipment, might actually be able to alienate own alienation, or alienate alienation, to displace displacement. That's the potential of artifice like this. So here we have a situation where actually nobody really seemed to pay any attention. But eventually there will be somebody, and eventually there will be others. That's how it starts. Of course, there's a rear view mirror, so this woman can see this interlocutor in the back. So you have two video cameras that transmit the eyes to the back, and microphone and speaker. So that person here is...
すみません。
あ、こんにちは。
目が見えますか？
見えるよ。
目が見えますか？
見える見える。
よかった。
Now there's a laughter on the other side.
今何してると思いますか？
ようわかんない。何する？
いや。
And the situation of this young woman whose father disappeared without leaving a word or penny. So the mother is blaming the father for everything. She lost the father. She also lost faith in men. She decided to move into cafeteria where lots of men are sitting, and during the lunchtime, the same kind of situation which her father was very often. So we'll see what happens. Reluctant. Reluctant to move.
はい、肉一人で入るんですか？はい、お願いします。ついてきてくださいよ。
おわーすごいね。目が見える。ウインクしてウインクして。すごい。
それでいきなり飛び出していったので。
あなたはね、じゃあその現象を見てどんなふうに思う？
すごく苦しかったです。私としてはなんで生まれてきたのかなって思って。
こんな状態だからそんなことが喋れるよね。
はい。
面と向かったらね。でもさ、そういった苦労を乗り越えて幸せになってよ。そのためにはよ、いい恋愛をしていい旦那をつかまないとな。ね。頑張って。
Yeah, it's easy to say, of course.
でも負けないでよ。な。
Well, okay, so they were naive, but perhaps human somehow. There's something, this man, they actually listen. So maybe that's why she started to cry, perhaps. It's hard to tell. But it looks like those tears were good tears. Of course, again, going back to buildings, combining equipment like this with projection created conditions for real-time projection or pre-recorded combined with real time, using, again, excuse me for this, wearable technology. That will actually be wearable projection station, in a sense. So that possibility, I definitely tested in Tijuana. That is a city big, very, 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 very big, very dynamic city, sitting on the other side of the border, where there's a kind of sleepy town, more or less, called San Diego. So the Tijuana as the place where worse things happen. Maybe the greatest things may happen, or maybe they do happen. And a city of maquiladora factories, hundreds, maybe more than hundreds of them, built along the border, assembly plants for parts that are coming from various markets and sent back to those markets as assembled products. Perhaps this projector was assembled in Tijuana by teenage girls who come from various parts. So in this center of Tijuana, there is a cultural center called El Centro Cultural, for which there's no room, in which there's no room for the experience of those people. So the idea was, why don't you speak about everything you like, what's in your stomach, in your heart, and in your mind, through this, what is called La Bola, or the big center, of course with the use of the most advanced at that time projection technology, and this special design wearable device that will 100% make it 100% clear that the face of each person will be perfectly fitting La Bola. The face, facade, connected words and concepts. So here there is, if we could turn the light a little bit lower, because once we're moving into night projections, ambient light is a problem. So with less light, we need to be able to see things like that. So here there is this equipment. And there were two pieces of this equipment design. One was in use, another was in preparation, and projected pre-recorded material over a year, and also ad hoc improvised statements by those women. Once they saw and heard themselves speaking, and also recognized that the people are listening to them, other things became appear in their mind, in their memory, so they could add more to this narrative. Of course, the issue is that they were also protected by others who couldn't take part in this project, but they were part of a larger network, support network, was somewhere between those women who were speaking in real time and the public who came from various places, also from San Diego, with the simultaneous translation and all sorts of media involved. Everybody actually was perfectly equipped to speak and to listen. It only looks so dramatic, but there's a counterweight there, so it's actually not very difficult to work.
So black, you guys, black camera.
So it's the light, the microphone, and the camera. Not a wireless transmission because there's too many interruptions, so we had to use cables, but now I think it's possible.
Ya que estaba con mi madre en Mazatlán, regresé a Tijuana, supe tu experiencia.
Nos golpeó también con la cacha de la pistola y mi amiga Wendy era novia de Héctor y se puso como loca, histérica, al ver que estaban golpeando a Héctor y nos estaban golpeando a nosotros.
This is about many issues. The women were speaking about abuses in factory, at home, domestic abuse, also police, the drug cartels, and all the issues that are... I mean, women are the most difficult situation in Tijuana. They are the basic, they are economical force of the city. They are all making that economy. And that subject of revenge in various ways by men. But it's important in this, you see from La Bola, from inside, people are coming out to join the crowd in front. Because inside of La Bola, there is IMAX theater. There's another projection going on. And that is a propaganda kind of projection. It was called at that time People of the Sun, about glorious relationship between people of Mexico and the United States. At the same time, that border situation between the United States and Mexico is the most dramatic situation for definitely this side of the border.
Quiso golpear a un policía con las manos, le empezó a golpear. Entonces, bueno, eso fue mucho rato, ¿no? De que lo estuvieron golpeando, a nosotros nos golpearon. Y a ella la subieron un policía la agarró y la subió a la patrulla. Entonces después se subió el otro, el que iba manejando la patrulla, y se fueron. Entonces nosotros pues estábamos, bueno, Rocío y yo estábamos muy nerviosas, y vimos a Héctor tirado en el piso, todo sangrado.
¡Cállate! Es la última vez que lo haces. No me vuelvas a gritar. No me vuelves a insultar. Jamás me vuelves a insultar.
This is a woman who is speaking to her husband, who was screaming at her all the time, abusing her in every possible way. Tried to escape to the border with his American girlfriend. They were caught at the border. They were chained. He was chained, she was not. And so it's a kind of revenge projection, at the same time with great sense of humor, and I don't have time to show all of those details. But in any case, it's very personal and very political statement to the person who was standing actually next to me. The husband was standing next to me. He had to listen to this. Everybody had to listen to this. The whole world had to listen to this.
Es lo último que voy a permitirte. Nunca jamás vuelvas a gritarme. Óyelo bien, nunca jamás.
So this encouraging experience for me in terms of the use of media and architecture, facade, I basically translated into other projects. I won't be able to show all of them, but I like to focus on the more recent ones, because we need to have time to have our...
But before we go there, could you tell us what did you expect from such projects? You faced people participating who played a real role, a real life, and the audience.
Well, so the issue of the audience, I'm glad you brought this. It's a complex issue, because everybody, or most people, always ask me what was the reaction of the audience to this type of work. It's a very generous question. Of course it's important, but in my mind it's less important initially than the other question that could be asked, in what way people who brought life to this project, who spoke through this La Bola, made sense of this work for their own life and for the life of others who perhaps couldn't be part of this project for various reasons. It's a very highly calculated risk to speak or not to speak, one of those women decided to speak, for example, because she put her husband into prison for incest, and the husband was about to come back from prison, and the husband was saying to everybody that the only thing he really wants to do is to kill her. So for her to speak in public was also the way of protecting herself. For others, it would be too risky to do so. They had to consult family members, lawyers, psychotherapists, activists, whoever was around, the whole network, private, family, and social support network. And maybe discuss it with even curators, with called Factor X, the special center for maquiladora people. Lots of people. So this means that a large number of people were involved in this project before it became so-called public. Therefore, something was born from within the process of development of the project, which I called inner public. The inner public was born. In some cases, like in Londonderry projection, some of people who participate, people who used to be together in the Civil War, in the same project, and some of them had to receive permission from 100 people to be part of the project. Otherwise, they will risk their own life and maybe life of those people. So that permission means involving all those people who were not speaking through this project, but they in fact protected the project from violence. So I'm saying it's a very long response to your question. I apologize, but it is kind of repositioning your question in the sense that the project generates own public, that public connects with another public, so the response of the public is as a result of the combination, the truth-telling, the honesty and risk-taking on the part of those who speak through it, adds to the integrity and also creates that special audience, inner audience, that it actually creates a new situation. And that is what, not that I expected this, I was glad to see that this happened, and I learned from those projects that this is what is happening, perhaps in many other media projects in public space, not only my project, for which there is no aesthetic theory, nor social or much of a political theory, because we always look at things from outside point of view, from what does it do to us. But this type of work that involves people, of course, needs to be different method of evaluating its impact. That's what I'm saying.
I appreciate very much the way you deal with the people participating in such projects, because the situation when the artist uses real people lives as a material for his artwork, it is sometimes risky. I remember many discussions around works of Santiago Sierra, for example. Yeah. In Poland, this is Artur Żmijewski, because probably they prepared sort of scripts, scenarios for the participants.
No, not Joanna Rajkowska. Not Joanna Rajkowska. No. So there are various type of works that in different way relate or play with or make use of people.
Because we are going to talk soon about new projects and new projections. I have a feeling that there is sort of similarity between the way you approached architecture and monuments in different projects. Some critics, maybe also yourself, we're talking about sort of a psychoanalysis of the architecture, searching for internal structures manifesting in the facades. This is sort of psychodramas you organize for the participants of the project, which is this sort of similarity I can say.
How now
that you try to help architecture in one case or people in another to express what is hidden.
Once it works for those who they call participants. I'm not even sure it's the right word.
I don't know yet.
We don't have a word name for those people. They are co-artists, they are collaborators.
Yes, I don't want to call them actors because they are not actors, collaborators.
They write their own script. And they develop their own technique of acting. Well, there's a Brechtian aspect of it, of course, but he actually, Brecht, when I'm speaking of Brecht, without knowing it, he was probably a very good psychoanalyst himself, because he wrote about technique of acting that develops alienation effect. That's important because it means that the actor was kind of standing next to himself as a character, and as a script writer and a character and an actor, and very often the actor, what was existential condition of an actor became part of the play. So, of course, it's very hard to find the right kind of aesthetic theory for this, because here you have a political theory, you have maybe psychoanalysis, as you say, but definitely social psychology that goes to it, and also the aesthetic theory and the media theory. We have all of those various things, and I have no idea really. I'm not a theorist in this way to put it all together, but ideology of architecture and built environment is definitely also part of it. So the theory of ideology, or kind of psycho-ideology of architecture, should be definitely learning something from this type of work. I'm not sure if I can really teach that field, but that field could learn something from it. Because we are always projecting ourselves onto those facades, without my projection. There is a process of architecturalization of our bodies and bodification of architecture. There is a projection of identification. The buildings are wrestling with their bodily metaphors. They have their own nightmares. So we do. We actually inhabit those buildings and monuments psychologically. So when there is a projection, somebody else is inhabiting them. So I have to meet that other person who is inhabiting the monument halfway as uninvited roommate. It's a very serious process of connecting with those people who animate those structures, as we saw, and ourselves. Another issue is that in order to animate such structure, people who do so, the animators, they have to animate themselves. And very often those people are completely inanimated, as if they were historical, motionless monuments themselves, because they are frozen, psychologically speaking, by the overwhelming experiences. In fact, they are locked into kind of traumatic, motionless and expressionlessness. So therefore, for them to really animate the monument, they have to confront themselves as monuments to their own trauma. So they are the monuments to their own trauma. Now, in order to confront the monuments as a physical structure frozen there, they have to unfreeze themselves. So this is a therapeutic effect as well. So you have therapy for those people and therapy for everybody else who is watching it on the other side, therapy of their own or numbness, lack of interest or feelings and emotional contact with people. So this is how this type of projection can be used
So what is the state after therapy?
After therapy,
What do you expect to
actually,
achieve?
therapy is not finished with this work. I think people have to go on with their lives and complete the project. This is not the end of it, it's the beginning for some. And not everybody is ready to take advantage of this opportunity. So it's only for those who are in that moment in their life, they are ready to make a leap, to join cultural projects, to reconnect with society through this project. And not everybody is ready to listen to it. The projects like this are helping to listen, because what you see on the screen is within the frame of the screen, so it's pretty sometimes horrifying. In reality, those buildings are immersed in city life. People move this way or that way. There are buses, there are sounds and motions. The things happen around, which also helps to perceive all of it with a certain distance, a healthy distance. So it's very difficult to speak about public projects like this, showing videos in a lecture hall. That's why I'm talking so much, because I try to believe, hopefully you believe what I'm saying.
I think that we should move to this most recent projects.
The more recent project.
To talk about Lincoln project.
Okay, so these are not on my screen here, so I have to find this. Okay, so this is what we see here is Union Square in New York City. Very important place historically, a stage of many different events, political events. It will be a long lecture just to explain the memory, history of that place. But this projection took place, as you can see, November 8th, but in fact it was 3 days before November 11th. It was on the occasion of Memorial Day, which is the end of First World War. We are now talking about First World War a lot because of 100th anniversary, but also it was 150th anniversary of Civil War, and of maybe not close to Abraham Lincoln kind of activities. So the projection took place during that time, but it was directed at Abraham Lincoln's. This is just single projector, very simple. And a very primitive, early stage of what is called now projecting mapping technology. So this is an information for the public. Abraham Lincoln, we could call him a veteran as well. His work he himself invented or took responsibility for, and the previous war in which he participated as a soldier. We don't know what was going on in his head. He suffered melancholia, perhaps a form of post-traumatic stress. He was assassinated almost immediately after the Civil War, so he couldn't write memoirs, so we don't know what was happening. But I asked veterans of Iraq, Afghanistan wars, the young people, and also Vietnam War veterans to animate this monument with their own experiences and voices, but also members of the families, soldiers, both men and women, to actually try to break the wall that separates those who know what war is, that is themselves, and those who don't, that is most of us. So that commemorative event, Memorial Day, will really be work of memory in a good sense, meaning work of memory, not celebration of some past, but thinking through all of this, including maybe asking yourself a question, was this civil war actually necessary? It was the bloodiest war in American history. Per capita, 5 times more people were killed than during the Second World War. It was incredible war. Probably secondary trauma of that war affected maybe generational, cross-generation trauma, so forth. So, those are the questions that one could ask. So the monument, actually, could you turn this light again? Thank you very much. So this is the monument. It's standing there frozen, not saying anything. It's time to make him speaking.
I suppose when a war starts, there's a certain drumbeat within what society says and what it does to get you to go, I imagine. And it sounded that drumbeat just kind of didn't make sense anymore. It didn't sound like a beat anymore. It just sounded like noise. And that's when I suppose I started to doubt the reasons for that war.
Go into the Marines is the first line of attack, and you're going to die, pretty much. So we're sitting in the kitchen, and we're talking, and I'm like, okay, you're going to die. And he just looked at me and gave me a look like any teenage kid. I mean, because he was, Nicholas was like around 18 and a half. So any teenage kids, oh, you know, you just blowing hot air and stuff like that. So we got into a very intense argument. He's like, well, then why would you tell me? I would think that you would understand why I'm joining the Marine Corps, because you were a Marine. And I stopped for a minute, because it's true, I wasn't a Marine. So why am I sitting here telling him? I said, because we're at war, you idiot. You freaking idiot. We're at war right now. If you go, you're going to die.
I was going to the bridge with a friend, and it was sunny, and I just felt like I was back in country, back in Iraq. And I felt like I wanted to be on the gun. Like I wanted to have the machine gun and just fire. But I just had that feeling, you know? Like being back there and just be, I don't know, the Marine and, you know, destroy and kill stuff, you know? But it's like a moment of, I want to say euphoria, but it's just for like a couple minutes. And then I realized that I'm just in Long Island, nowhere else.
More, I couldn't express myself to a simple "I love you." I would say it back, but the emotion wasn't there. The genuine emotion wasn't there. I still had that armor around my heart, because it was hard for me to explain, you know, how I felt genuinely and who I was and what I've been through.
So, of course, I don't really have time to show the full length of projects like this, but it's important that those who brought life to this monument, they in fact came also to see it. So they also saw other people watching it, taking it seriously. So that is the moment of reintegrating what they were saying back to themselves. So this way, rather than being speechless monuments to their own trauma, they became speaking monuments, which is a step ahead. Of course, in kind of, let's say, psychotherapeutic theory, according to the trauma theorist and clinician Judith Herman, a classic book, Trauma and Recovery, you probably know about that book, 1997 written, and to many others who work with trauma, the struggle for recovery from trauma to finding a narrative voice through testimony has a greater chance of success when performed as a public speech act, even more so when directed as a social utterance to and on behalf of others. Thus, truth-telling and testimony have a restorative power. The psychologist Pierre Janet, in 1901, termed this act presentification. So this is how the media project in public space can help that presentification to take place.
Yes, but this is also something else. I think one may say that it was already present in the previous projects, but we are, with such projects, we are getting closer to the topic of your lecture, critical archive, because, of course, there are still people. People sharing memories, ideas connected to war. But the monument, the war, and the way war is represented is slowly getting into focus, I would say. In your abstract, you quoted Walter Benjamin. The way in which the past is honored as heritage is more disastrous than its simple disappearance could ever be. I mean, archive from certain perspective, it's just data organized in a certain way. Sometimes we believe that we can make use of data according to ourselves. Data just, they are ready, stand by to be used. But actually, we have always interfaces. Interfaces organize the way we can access data and the way data can be significant. This is a little bit against information theory, maybe, database theory. But when we talk about cultural data, when we talk about data, culture as data basis, it's getting in this direction.
Culture transmits the worst things as well. So the issue is how to revisit this archive with a critical and deconstructive eye, so it will not repeat itself in the future what mistakes and injustices in the past happened. And that disruption of continuity of what's worse is maybe, I don't know what connects with theory of archive, but definitely a philosophy of history. And say, Nietzsche was speaking about three different histories: the monumental history, the critical history, and archival history, or antiquarian history, depending how you translate it. So for him, well, the critical history was something perhaps he would prefer. It's not clear. He was dubious about all of them. But because it is a projection of the present concern, of present time, onto the past data, to actually treat it as a suspect, as something that should not continue in the future, Or Benjamin probably would say it's more like a clash between the future and the past that explodes in the present. That we bring those two and explode in order to interrupt the history with a prophetic act of announcing something new to come. And this monument is something very interesting etymologically. We are in the right place maybe to refer to this in this university, because it's something that was moneo, memento. Monument is a work of warning. It's a warning. It's like, I remind you, or I would like you to mind, or be aware that something happened, so perhaps it should not happen again, or let's hope that it will happen again, because it's a great thing that happened. Whatever, but it is always a warning that it might not happen again, it should happen, or it will happen again, it should not happen. So this is, in that sense, people who animate those monuments, animate themselves, but also they make that monument, speaking in the concrete terms of the warning. You know, so they make sense of the monument, rather than simply allowing those monuments to be immersed in vegetation and gentrification and be decoration. You know, something that is adding some real estate value, right, to various parts of the city because it stands for past. Something to cherish without clear thing. Another thing is about celebration of the past. Is something very dangerous of which Benjamin said. He said the way the past is celebrated is worse than. It was Prime Minister Cameron that made a mistake without knowing that he is making a mistake in public. Talking about First World War celebration rather than commemoration. Benjamin would definitely turn in the grave, you know, and scream.
What about Arc de Triomphe? This is the very recent.
The Arc de Triomphe, it's, well, actually, when we talk about Arc de Triomphe, we must speak about the original modern Arc de Triomphe, not the ancient in Rome, which is the Arc de Triomphe that is the one in Paris. Let's see where is this thing here. Okay. For your screen mode. This one. It's a mother or father or all of the modern artists. It actually is an exhibition inside. It used to be. All of the Arc de Triomphe globally, they are born of this one. So it is an interactive map, so you can see where those children of this one, all smaller except one, I guess, in India or Pakistan, India. This one is bigger. So also, this is the first modern eternal flame, which was placed to commemorate unknown soldier. And so the eternal flame as a tomb of unknown soldier also multiply everywhere, including the one in Warsaw. So that means that we're talking about Arc de Triomphe that is standing for all of them. So this one is work of art. We spoke about this before. We're talking about art of animating or making sense of that heritage, projections, and so forth. But we have to also recognize that many of those structures, actually all of them, are works of art. This is art done with the best artists at that time. Rude was an excellent sculptor. He was the best architect. Fantastic work. I consider if today There is a crime of a war of aggression adopted by International Criminal Court, and in fact, aggressive war is considered as crime even by the United Nations. It should be another crime added to it. The crime of disseminating, advocating war as a way to resolve conflict. This should be a crime. It's a crime of the culture of war. And this, by my standards, and I hope soon adopted standards. So this, of course, is complete opposite. It does everything opposite. It does everything to convince us that the only way to make peace is through war. This is the main narrative of the art. As you can see, people are very small, even smaller than those smaller reliefs there. So it's an incredible amount of narrative there. I don't want to get into this, we don't have time, but it could be just another separate lecture showing how deliberate, how precise, artistically perfect the whole narrative of Arc de Triomphe is trying to convince us that the war is a glorious thing, it's actually something honorable, that dying and on the altar of this kind of god of war, because it's almost like a shrine, it's a sacred duty. And of course, here the leader is being awarded by achieving this peace as a result of a major bloodbath in human history. If we were to behave, act, and even look this way in a peacetime, each of us will be either in prison or in mental hospital. So the war allows us to act in a most human way, dehumanizing others, dehumanizing ourselves as soldiers, creating this kind of madness. Worse, dying, earlier you die in your life, younger you are, and more actually hopelessly, even defenseless you are, better. It's, as you can see, this young boy is being led straight to the front line. We know very well in our country here, Poland, we don't know, we don't want to know who is lying in Tomb of Unknown Soldier in Warsaw. We know it, we don't want to know it. It's in the internet, everybody can read it. It's 14 years old boy. Well, by contemporary standards, it was a crime to send, of course, this boy to war. But anyway, it's not. So when I explain this to some historians, they say, you are wrong, this is a metaphor. Well, it's not a metaphor. We see children of war everywhere. They're being... and another thing, the masochism of war, the pleasure of dying. The old grenadier of the Napoleonic Guard, saying goodbye to Napoleon when he was departing to his island, deported to the island. He said, "Sir, we shall no longer have a pleasure to die for you." So, of course,
Krzysztof, we may stop in a while, so please show us
this
your
is the project.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The project is to actually embed this monument into different structure. The structure that will allow tourists and researchers to be very close to the whole ideological narrative of this arch. With the media equipment, all kinds of programs that are kind of working on culture of war in a deconstructive way and also proactively trying to contribute to a situation in which there will be no conflicts, preventing the war from happening, celebrating and commemorating those who actually averted the wars, supplementing the information that is in the arch with what's missing there, the actual cost of war, all the destruction that the war caused, all cross-generational trauma, the real numbers, and also to create conditions for people to be so close to those icons that this you can see here various narratives, alternative narratives, maybe narratives that undo narratives that are already there, discussion fora, places where people argue in a very dynamic way, elaborating on past conflicts and also trying to discuss how to avert conflicts and deal with, transform the conflict from malignant conflict to creative conflicts in various parts of the world. Being able to sign up for various programs, projects that are really doing something so there will be no war here and there, and so forth. So this kind of project, getting close, eye to eye, with this mad Marseillaise, or almost like a goddess of war. When you get so close, you are no longer hypnotized by it. So that's one important aspect of it. So with various other possibilities of maybe using media to refer to existing situation, changing situation, this kind of structure probably will look better than it looks now.
Thanks, Chair. We should leave some time for questions. I encourage everybody to get in interaction with Krzysztof, first of all. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for this very, very interesting talk. I want to know more about this project. Is this going to be realized? Was it commissioned? Is it part of a competition with other projects? What is the institutional context of it?
It's uncommissioned project. So it's a proposal. The process of disseminating this proposal is part of the project. So there was one book published called Abolition of War in London. There's another one going to be published in France. And also there was one published in Poland with expanded edition that was dealing with specifically Polish issue, which is called martyrology, meaning the cult of heroic death or war martyrdom in Poland, with some project. So this is important part of the project, is to promote the project. But objective is that something like this must be built. Maybe in slightly different form as a result of the process of discussing it, may actually assume different forms, but it has to still be something very close to this place of cult of culture of war, this or that place, and it has to have basically those primary programs secured there. And I don't know if this will happen during my lifetime, but yeah, great things happen in this way that they seem to be impossible. So it doesn't mean that this will succeed, but I will do everything I can So the politicians so far are not very keen on this. But at the same time, European Union is actually feel obliged to do something with monuments like this. The only reason for European Union is to eliminate wars in Europe. Mr. Monet used all of his skills that are, of course, political and economical proposals, and all of this was only for that purpose. At the same time, national cultures of each member state of the Union is cherishing their own cultures of war as part of their national heritage. So there is a contradiction here. It is European Union that should actually look closer at projects of this sort and maybe encourage through their central kind of powers those who want to build things like this in each of the countries.
Thanks very much for this. It's really, really inspiring work. I'm interested to learn a little bit more about how you worked with your collaborators and developed trust so that they would write their own scripts. I understood that they developed their own scripts that they later performed. How long did it take, and what kind of methods did you use to sort of build trust?
In the projection of Tijuana, which is a very elaborate project, and which I already spoke, it took 1 year of my appearances and disappearances, and people taking advantage of my disappearances, and building up various discourses around it, and gauging their own potential involvement, and those. But this process is complicated, because when I arrive as a stranger, of course I have certain advantage over people who live there, because strangers have certain advantages. People are more honest towards a stranger, as long as the stranger is going to leave, it doesn't stay as part of the circulation of power in this area. Can be more trusted, but there is a limit to this. There are also strangers who prove to be not trustworthy, like journalists who made sensational reports, or documentary filmmakers who romanticize, their lives, or some made money of it. So, of course, appearing with the proposal, here I am, I want to be useful to you. And I know how to do this, but you are actually core of the project. They have to eliminate, they have to destroy me. They have to destroy the project, psychologically speaking, those people, the initial group. What's then my role? My role is to survive the destruction, to come back again and again. There will be other people coming who learn from those who didn't like it first place, or who couldn't come next time. There is this process in which people are absorbing that as a potential, or something that they can use for themselves. But it takes time. I also have to explain to them that I'm using them, because I have this idea of democracy, or public space, or a country developing some discourses, making things happen. So that's my project, and it's true. So they may be useful for that project, but at the same time, they have an intuition, some of those people, that project might be useful for them, because they will break that wall, they will jump into more cultural project, will be part of something larger, or, as I mentioned before, be protected by it. So this is the process. After a while, there was a core group form of people who really think they may be doing it. And the people who used to protect those from me, meaning activists, psychotherapists, lawyers, because they also didn't trust me. They had to learn from this core that I can be trusted. You know, this is how it goes, that way. So eventually it somehow works. So there was more and more people included in initial meetings. Some of them will never really be actors and script writers, but they will be supporting it and so forth. That's how it works.
I have a very short question. Maybe I missed something because I'm sorry I came in a bit later, but most of the works that I saw are either projections or they are site-specific interventions onto monuments. And so I was wondering if there is a relation between the wearables and the architecture in some way.
There is. They're both, I mean, the architectures being appropriate here, as if it was suitable to function as prosthetic device. So the monument becomes prostheses through which people, it's a cultural prosthetics we're talking about, as much as with the equipment, wearable equipment. And now in Tijuana there was both wearable equipment, and the facade was prosthetics device became, and the equipment. It's so the missing or dysfunctional parts of human body can be, replaced, or it could be enhanced by prosthetics. So also psychological aspects of operation of human's life can be receive prosthetics. So in that sense, I'm right now working on a project, very early stage, of a post-war helmet for war veterans. The helmet that will help those who survived the war, or could also be those who survived the war in a domestic battleground, as families or spouses or friends of veterans, returning soldiers. They could be all wearing the equipment that will help them to operate in public space without easier, despite of the flashbacks and post-traumatic reactions, camouflaging certain sounds, transforming frequencies, or maybe giving a preview of what's happening around, so they will be less vulnerable, or once operate. It's complicated to explain how difficult it is for those people to operate in public space, but at the same time, so they could communicate what really is happening inside of them to others in the same way, similar way as other projects. So this is truly a prosthetic device. Now, perhaps again, this could be connected with monuments. Maybe monuments can start speaking to each other. That's something I'm thinking of doing, maybe in Liverpool, during the part of the Biennale, because Liverpool has a very special kind of public symbolic environment, populated, because the cities are populated by residents and also by monuments. Right. So they have a large population of monuments. So it's important how residents can speak to each other through monuments. So I will try. I don't know if this is an answer to your question. Is it? Yeah, no, thank you. That's nice. Generous perception on your part.
Thank you very much. I have the question. Did you go back and follow the further life process of your actors or subjects, so to say, not actors?
I didn't fully understand what you said.
Did you, in the projects you have done, did you go back?
Back.
And follow how their lives continue? continued? For example, your work was done.
Yes, actually, in Krakow, which was the first narrative, we can call it participatory, even if I don't like this term, projection. 10 years after, I spoke with people. There were women mostly who were talking about domestic abuse and so forth. Yeah, for me, there is some positive aspect of this project. They're telling me and each other, they keep contact with each other. That's also important, that there's some network around each project. People continue communicating with each other. But also there are not satisfactory situations. Not the damage done by work, but that change is not happening just because of the project. It takes much more than one project to imagine any change. It's more of a combination of people working in cinema, in performance, in literature, in all sorts of cultural areas over a longer time period, that the change may happen or worse situation might not happen, which is probably also important to remember. So in this case, I learned that, yes, the one person who was speaking about incredible cases of abuse, she was being abused and her daughter being abused by her husband, that she being a psychologist herself, because abuse is the same among intellectuals and working class or unemployed. Rape is a rape, abuse is abuse. She was actually a licensed psychologist, and she told her daughter, listen, be very careful. You may be seeking abuser now because of some kind of fixed condition in which you grew up. And even that didn't help. Her daughter was still seeking abuser. So that was a kind of sad, for me, difficult moment. But also there are very positive moments where people are jumping into different life as a result of this. In Tijuana, videos and material that was produced in this projection is being used to solicit new members for Factor X, the organization, which is officially dealing with labor rights or human rights established by central government for Tijuana, but in fact it is self-help post-traumatic stress group. People always help each other, so they use this. So there are positive aspects. I have to start, I didn't think about writing a report to myself about this, but there was somebody who I learned about Tijuana from a researcher, sociologist, who came several years after, and I got from her report that actually this project still is being used, is useful. Maybe in a different way than maybe was intended some way. So, anyway, yeah, there are some transformative aspects. Well, people through the process, they becoming different people. Some among veterans, like in Liverpool projection, which was with war veteran and combat stress organization, there was a couple that was at war with each other because he almost killed her without remembering when, and she couldn't take him anymore. It's just very difficult couple. So they were, now I visited them in Liverpool, and they're still together. And they may fight, but it's a good fight. They actually are pretty much. So they used the project. They made very good use of the project. That's their success. So if the project doesn't work, it's my failure, I think. If it works, it's their success. That's how it is. And in Warsaw, another way the couple soldier and his spouse used the project. They decided to divorce, but in an extremely friendly way, positive way. You know, they created they started to talk to each other through the project, because it's sometimes easier to tell the truth in public space than to each other in a domestic, intimate environment. So they heard themselves. It's a kind of strange thing to hear yourself in public space. It's maybe ear becomes a kind of transitional object. It becomes a kind of prosthetics itself in public space. So anyway, I don't know exactly how it works. They made good use of the project.
Thank you. It was very fascinating. My question is in line with the theme of the conference. I was wondering if these projects are archived, and if so, how? And in particular, not only the devices and the footage, but also the more event aspect of the project, if they are documented somehow.
But as an event, before I respond to the idea of archive as event, I should just put your question brought back important fact. In Derry, Londonderry, it was enormous amount of recordings done by people who used to shoot at each other's back during the Civil War. So they share this project in hope that they will turn the public space into communicative environment, so their testimonies, their stories could peacefully coexist as a part of history of Derry, Londonderry. That's true, but there was so much of it that we only use certain amount. So maybe 10 times more was recorded. So this is now part of an archive, university archive in Derry, Londonderry. It's incredible amount of material. So it's a maybe side effect, but it will not be side effect if it was no project. Now, it is another way. There are lots of those projects are recorded by media. So they circulate on internet. You could revisit many of those projects right now, clicking on various websites, various organizations. So you have internet, it's unreached by lots of those testimonies, and sometimes even transcribed statements. So I don't know whether this is an answer to your question. I don't want to move into theory of archive or philosophy of archive. It's something that this conference will, I'm sure, elaborate in depth.
We have time just for one last question.
Hi, thank you for this really inspiring talk. You've just touched upon my question just a little bit. I was wondering, many of your subjects actually belong to the realm of exclusivity of technology, so being excluded from actually access to technology. So many of your subjects probably are not able to see your works on regular basis or follow you on the internet, or because we're talking about this power of media these days, but what about countries that are excluded from access to the media? Yet media is, of course, so important to your work, to your great work. I was wondering whether you have any thoughts on that.
No, with its media, like the projection in Tijuana was actually transmitted by television. The project in Japan, Disarmor, was on national television, NHK. It's a 2-hour film, actually revealing all of those young people worries and their refusals, which caused a protest on the part of Psychotherapeutic Association, saying that it's against the rule that people who are under treatment are actually being televised and they speak in public. Why? Because they were telling the truth also about their parents or about this and that. So in that sense, it was very parasiastic program to our program. So, and this kind of media, and you see lots of people transmitting images of projection. For example, Lincoln projection with iPods and veterans themselves. I think people are equipped. The cell phones actually are so popular that it's part of our daily life, you know, and it's part of our brain, no? So in the poorer countries actually are perfectly equipped with this technology, as far as I know. So I'm not sure whether this is such a deep problem. It's true that there's uneven access to internet in large parts of the world, and that may be. But still, even equipment like projections or building various prosthetic devices is also limited. So in that sense, projects like this rely on grants and support of cultural organizations, university, research centers, and festivals. Or the moments where there's some accumulation of budgets and interest in critical work in public space. So there is a limit. Absolutely. But, okay, saying this, I guess I read that maybe I should think of other projects that are not relying on technology so much.
I wasn't suggesting that, but...
Okay. Thank you very much. Krzysztof.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for the participation. See you tomorrow.